Last week I had a chance to interview your opponent, Ron DeSantis, and his running mate, Jeanette Nunez. One of the things that they kept coming back to was this belief, and Jeanette Nunez point blank said she believes you're a socialist.
Well, I really hate to see the race devolve into that kind of name calling. And let me be clear. First of all, I'm a Democrat. I don't make apologies for that. But more importantly, I'm a Floridian. And I hope that Ms. Nunez as well as Mr. DeSantis recognizes that under that term, and I understand what they're attempting to do to elicit fears, particularly for folks who come from these very dangerous regimes where you have political leaders who literally snuff out the life of their political opponents, take from people what is not theirs. I've come nowhere near that. Simply saying that we ought to pay teachers what they're worth, that we ought to treat health care as a right and not a privilege, expand Medicaid for 800,000 people. There's nothing extreme about that. What I consider to be extreme is the reckless use of language as a way to dog whistle to certain communities that they got to be afraid of me. Well, the truth is that Floridians are not afraid of me because I'm not different, no different than them. I was born in Miami-Dade, grew up in Richmond Heights. My mother drove school bus for the Miami-Dade school system, and my daddy was a construction worker. And when construction work got slow, he sold fruits and vegetables on the street corner, and on Saturday morning sold flowers to bereaved families. My experience is no different than the everyday experience of Floridians. I just want to make it better.
You talk about the dog whistles. I know that this was one of the areas that I had discussed with former Congressman DeSantis was some of the issues that have dogged his campaign. And one thing in particular, there was an incident where one of his financial backers posted on Twitter a racial epithet directed at President Obama, referring to him as a Muslim as well. I'm wondering if you're surprised that Ron DeSantis has not returned the campaign contributions that individual made, and what do you believe that says about Ron DeSantis?
Well, I think Ron DeSantis has to make these decisions for himself, but obviously if he disagrees, as he says he does, with this person's opinions about President Obama and the language that he used there, then I think he ought to give the money back. But moreover, this campaign started with the whole Florida don't monkey it up thing, right? And from there, that same week, we saw neo-Nazis making calls into the state of Florida. Beyond that, we had a Republican committee woman in Orlando talking about the fact that I'm running to give black people reparations, give my people something. This has really gone off the rails. And it's up to Mr. DeSantis to put it back on the rails. This is his campaign. His followers will take license from what coverage he gives to them. And it's my hope that for the duration of this campaign that we can stop name calling, stop talking about the color of my skin. The color that people in this state are concerned about is the blue-green algae flowing out of the east and the west side of this state. The color they're concerned about is the color green, and that's money for the 44% of people who can't make ends meet at the end of the month. Let's talk about that. That's what this campaign ought to be about, and not about the color of my skin.
Well, last question on this point. Do you believe that Ron DeSantis is a racist?
I've not called Mr. DeSantis a racist, and I don't know the intentions of his heart. What he has to figure out, and I think what Floridians want to know is why so many racists seem to be behind Mr. DeSantis. Why do they find comfort there? I think he's got to make clear where he stands, what he believes, to decry not only publicly, but also to return those funds from people who spew such hatred and vitriol.
All right, let's turn to some of the issues. Let's start with education. Talk to me a little bit about your education plan. The way I've sort of summarized it is that you want to guarantee, you want to get more money into education by raising the corporate tax rate 2 percentage points and guaranteeing teachers would make at least $50,000 a year. Is that the broad strokes, or put some more onto it?
It is part of the broad strokes. What we've said is we want to make sure that we pay teachers what they're worth. Right now in the state of Florida, the average salary for teachers is the 45th lowest of all 50 states. That's a shame. These are people who do what I consider to be the most difficult work that exists in society. They're, aside from our parents, responsible for the shaping, the molding, the inspiring of the minds of our most precious gifts, our children. And yet we treat them, you know, as if they're nothing, that their work is insignificant. We've got right here in South Florida, school boards deliberating whether or not they ought to change zoning on property of school board property to allow for affordable housing for teachers because they can't afford to live in the community communities where they teach. We have also said, as part of our education initiative, that we want to expand access to high-quality early childhood education, where over 90% of the brain is developed is at the early years. We've also said we want to reintroduce into the public middle and high school system trades, apprenticeships. While college worked for me, for my older siblings, it was woodwork, shop, mechanical, electrical, technical, all of those kinds of skills that allow people to get a skill that they could monetize, go to work and get a good job that they can make a good living. That's what we've got to do, and I don't think there's anything crazy about trying to invest in education.
The issue of teacher salaries being set at a minimum of $50,000, the pushback that I've heard on that is that's not something that the governor or the state sets. Those salaries are set by each individual school board. So how can you guarantee teachers a $50,000 minimum salary if that's not something that comes out of Tallahassee?
Well, resources for public education do come out of Tallahassee. Now, there is also local funding through our local school boards and through local taxation, but absolutely the state can say, we want to do our part to ensure that teacher salaries are at a minimum at the national average. So
you would be willing to have this Tallahassee, the state, mandate that salaries across the entire state have to be at least $50,000?
$50,000, and to contribute to it, unlike what the Republicans have done, which is basically say, here are your unfunded mandates, go make it happen. We want on-campus security, but we don't want to pay for it. Go figure out a way to pay for it. What we're saying is, we want to make those things easier for districts to make that decision by ensuring that we can support them through it.
And the way that you would pay for that, in part, is by raising the corporate tax rate. Right. Again, some of the pushback to that would be that you endanger the Florida economy itself by doing that, by making Florida seem not a good place for businesses to relocate. Also, the argument is often made that any tax increase on corporations are often just passed down to consumers, or that the corporations might defend themselves by laying off employees. Could your plan actually hurt working people?
Yeah, I think just the opposite. First of all, Georgia and Alabama both have higher corporate tax rates than the state of Florida. And the last time I checked, the dollar menu in those states are the same as they are here in the state of Florida. I think that argument falls flat. I also believe that this idea that being a cheap gate state works for the state of Florida, it doesn't. Companies locate in places where they can be assured a good workforce, where their employees can be assured a good quality of life. What we have said about our corporate tax plan, because it's important and the Republicans have tried to maneuver this thing a different way, only about 3% of companies in the state of Florida pay the corporate tax rate. 98%, 97% of businesses in the state of Florida don't pay the corporate tax rate at all. These also happen to be the wealthiest 3% of corporations in the state of Florida. And thanks to the Trump tax realignment, they got a $6.3 billion windfall. And so all we've said is you can keep $5.3 billion. We want $1 billion to come into the state so that we can train your future workforce. It's not only good for the state of Florida and for the people of the state, it's also good for the businesses of the state of Florida. To me, it makes sense, and quite frankly, I look forward to working with the legislature to get some movement on it.
You think you could get that passed?
I do hope so. I mean, I think
but
what we've got to
hope is one thing, but reality can be another.
I don't know what legislature I'll be inheriting. We've got Democrats who are competing up and down the ballot. We have an electorate that recognizes that there's something unfair and inequitable about the system. Those same corporations who got that $6.3 billion, it was supposed to trickle down. Instead, they did stock buybacks, restricted the amount of folks who had access to stocks, and therefore increased again their bottom line. So that argument hasn't worked. We've got to get to work for the regular people of this state.
I want to just take a step back and talk about the campaign, and I'm curious as to your thought that there are a lot of people, I hear this all the time, that Andrew Gillum will be the savior for the Democrats in Florida and will rescue Bill Nelson. You'll drag his campaign over the finish line and let him win. You'll help other candidates. Do you feel that sense of responsibility?
Well, I think what we've got to do is turn more people out. Now, in the primary, we saw about 150,000 voters turn out who were either, one, voting for the first time, or two, hadn't voted in the previous 3 elections. It's our goal to double that number in this general election. And I think more diverse electorates, poor voters, black and brown voters, younger voters, tend to, quite frankly, help to elect more progressive candidates. And so I'm going to do my part. As we said in the primary election, and I believe it earnestly in this general election, we've got to give our voters a reason to go out and vote for something. I believe that our campaign is offering that, and if we turn those voters out, I believe it will benefit everybody up and down the ballot.
You talked about how little money you were spending compared to your opponents in the primary. One of the factors that is often cited, and I'm curious as to your take on this, is that one of the things that you benefited from was your opponents never attacked you. That they didn't spend the dollar. They spent a lot of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, tearing each other, but didn't come after you. And that in a general election, now that we're in, you're going to start facing some of those attacks. Particularly, we've seen the Republican Party of Florida and Mr. DeSantis in his interview with me last week raising issues about the FBI investigation. I know you've addressed this, and you say you are not the target of the investigation.
Not only have I said I'm not the target, but there's no evidence to suggest that I'm the target of any investigation.
So I want to just take a step back on the broader issue of what this investigation sort of is ongoing. It's about what's happening in the city of Tallahassee, and I guess the reason where your name intersects in this is in some of a couple of trips that you took, one to New York with somebody who may be under investigation, appears to be under investigation, that also was accompanied by some undercover FBI agents, and another trip that you took with people who do business with the city who are also longtime friends of yours to Costa Rica. I guess what I'm curious about is, can you understand why some people may have a concern, apart from what the Republican Party of Florida is saying, that your relationship to people who do business with the city, the perception doesn't look good?
Yeah, I mean, what I have to say is that, first of all, I don't care how long I've been friends with anybody. And again, you mentioned, and it is true, that these are people who have been longtime friends since I was in college. What folks ought to understand about me is that I've been elected for 15 years, and I've served honorably by doing right, not by doing wrong. I don't take what doesn't belong to me. I have too much to, frankly, survive for. My 3 kids, my wife, my integrity, the values that my mother and my grandmother instilled in me. What I would never do is trade my vote or my support in exchange for anything. And if that's what the Republicans are suggesting, then they are flat wrong. All of us have people who may have disappointed us at different points in our lives. I'm no different from that. But we should not take that to in any way suggest that I would do anything corrupting or illegal in exchange for friendship.
In hindsight, and hindsight is always 20/20, but in looking back on it, is there any lessons that you learned in terms of that perception, in terms of how you conduct yourself under the harsh glare of public scrutiny now?
Sure. Well, I would say, first of all, my values and my integrity will always remain intact. I think what I would learn, and what I think I have learned, is I've in many ways been extremely trusting of people who are around me, with the belief that everybody has good intentions for me. And that isn't always the case. Now, the truth is I didn't learn many of these folks were FBI agents until afterwards, but it didn't impact my behavior at all. I still conduct myself in a way that I thought would be a way of integrity. And I think going forward, I'll always be a little bit more circumspect about, well, who's around me and why they may be around me.
Up next, more of my interview with Andrew Gillum and the question, should recreational marijuana be legalized in Florida?